My name is Ethan Cole. I'm 46 years old, and I've spent over 2 decades behind the wheel of a long-haul truck. Not glamorous, but it paid the bills. And it kept my wife, Lauren, in the lifestyle she said she wanted. We live just outside of Cedar Falls, Iowa. Quiet town, quiet life. I thought that was enough. Before I go on, if this story resonates with you in any way, please don't forget to subscribe, like, and share the channel. Sometimes, stories like this need to be heard to remind people they're not alone. For weeks, I had this pressure in my chest, brushed it off. Probably just the late-night coffee, the erratic sleep. That day, I was driving through Nebraska when the pain became unbearable. Pulled over on the shoulder, called 911 myself. I don't remember much after the helicopter landed. Just the doctor's voice before everything faded. We're losing him. I woke up 2 days later in a hospital bed in Des Moines, with a stent in my heart and tubes running from both arms. The nurse said I flatlined twice. "You're lucky," she told me. I didn't feel lucky when I checked my phone. Only one message, from Lauren, a screenshot of our joint bank account, $0, 0 cents. Below it, she wrote, "I deserve this, after everything I've done for you." That was it. No, "Are you okay?" No, "I'm here." Just the balance, and the betrayal. $64,000 gone, emergency funds, truck maintenance reserves, my retirement cushion. I should have been furious. Should have shouted, cried, something. But all I did was send back a thumbs-up emoji. That's when I knew it wasn't just my heart that had broken. It was something deeper, like I'd been running on fumes for years, and only now realized I'd been running alone. The doctor said I'd need 6 weeks off the road. No stress. "Will someone be picking you up tomorrow?" he asked. I nodded. Lied. Because the only thing I was sure of was that I wasn't going home. I didn't sleep that night. I just laid in that stiff hospital bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the hum of machines and the occasional beep from someone else's monitor down the hall. It wasn't the pain in my chest keeping me awake. It was the silence. A kind of silence that settles deep in your bones when the person you trusted most just walks out with everything, without a word. The next morning, I told the nurse I had someone picking me up. Another lie. After she left, I pulled out my phone and did something I hadn't done in nearly a year. I called my brother, Caleb. Caleb and I weren't close anymore. Not because of any big falling out. We just lived in different worlds. He stayed in Iowa Falls, working local construction jobs, raising 2 boys on his own after the divorce. I was always out on the road, chasing the miles. The phone rang twice. "Ethan?" he answered, half surprised. "Yeah," I said, my voice rough from the breathing tubes. "Need a favor?" "Name it." "I need a place to stay for a few days, and I need you not to tell Lauren I'm alive." There was a long pause. "She doesn't know?" "Oh, she knows," I said quietly. "She just doesn't know I'm not coming back." I checked out of the hospital by noon. A nurse helped me into a cab. An hour later, Caleb opened his front door with a shocked expression and a firm hug. The last time we'd hugged, I was 38, and we just buried our dad. This one felt heavier. "You look like hell," he said, helping me to the spare room. "I feel worse." He handed me a sandwich and asked if Lauren had really taken everything. I nodded. "What are you going to do?" "I don't know yet, but I'm not doing it from that house." That afternoon, while Caleb went to pick up his boys from school, I sat alone in the guest room, staring at the suitcase I hadn't even unpacked. Just me and the sound of his old wall clock ticking. I kept thinking about how Lauren had changed over the years. The way she stopped asking when I'd be home. How her phone never left her hand at dinner. Trips with friends I never met. I thought I was providing. I thought I was protecting our life. Turns out, I was financing my own exit. I opened my laptop and checked the private accounts Lauren didn't know about. Small investments, a retirement rollover I'd never touched. Still there. Still mine. Not because I hid them. She just never cared enough to ask. It was the first time I felt like I had a footing in this whole mess. That night, as the house quieted and Caleb's kids drifted off to sleep down the hall, I sat in the dark living room and whispered to no one. She tried to bury me. But I'm still here. And for the first time since that heart attack, I believed it. 3 days into my stay at Caleb's place, I received a text that made my stomach tighten. It wasn't from Lauren. It was from our neighbor, Mr. Griffin, the retired mailman who lived across the street from our place in Cedar Falls. Hey, Ethan. Haven't seen your truck in a while. Everything okay? Lauren's had someone over the past couple days. Thought you should know. I just stared at the message. No reply. Just the slow, sick sinking of everything I hadn't wanted to admit now catching up to me in bold black letters. I didn't forward the message, didn't show Caleb, just let it sit there, pulsing like a wound. Later that afternoon, I asked Caleb to drive me into town, not to our usual bank, but to the main branch downtown where nobody knew me by name. I asked to speak with someone in fraud and compliance. A woman named Rebecca brought me into a side office. She was professional but kind, with that calm tone people use when they know the conversation's going to hurt. I slid my phone across the desk and pointed to the screenshot Lauren had sent me. The account wiped clean, captioned with her cold line. I deserve this. I was in the ICU when this happened, I explained. 2 days on life support. She emptied everything while I was unconscious. Rebecca frowned. It's a joint account, which gives her access. But under these circumstances, Mr. Cole, we can initiate a fraud review. We'll need documentation of your hospitalization, including confirmation of when you were incapacitated. I can get that, I said. She leaned back, tapping notes into her computer. You should also be aware, if this progresses into a criminal matter, we'll need to involve law enforcement. I met her eyes. I'm okay with that. Back in the car, Caleb didn't ask questions. We just stopped for gas. I stayed inside while he filled the tank. Through the windshield, I saw a father and his daughter laughing as they came out of the gas station with ice cream bars. The kind of ordinary moment that suddenly feels like another life. Want anything? Caleb asked as he got back in. I shook my head. Back at his house, I made 3 calls that evening. The first was to my dispatcher, told him I needed extended medical leave. He didn't push, just wished me well. The second was to the credit union, where I kept a small side account for solo runs. I added additional protections, 2-factor access, and changed the beneficiary from Lauren to Sadie. The third was to Blake, the attorney Caleb had recommended. He picked up on the second ring. I've started gathering paperwork, I said. Bank activity, medical records, statements from the hospital. You still good to meet tomorrow? I'll be ready, he said. And Mr. Cole? Yeah? You're doing the right thing. After I hung up, I opened my laptop and logged into the accounts Lauren didn't know existed. Everything was still there. Investment portfolios, 2 mutual funds I'd left untouched for years, and a small annuity my uncle left me that I never talked about. Not hidden. Just invisible to someone who never looked. That's when another message came through, this time from Lauren. Where are you? Your truck's not at the depot. Did someone tell you I came by? We need to talk. I stared at the screen, heart thudding, not from fear, not even anger, just a weariness I couldn't explain. I set the phone down without answering. From across the kitchen, Caleb noticed. She reaching out? I nodded. You gonna reply? I closed the laptop. Not yet. The next morning, I woke to the smell of bacon and the soft thud of Caleb's boots in the kitchen. For a moment, I forgot everything. My chest didn't hurt. The world hadn't cracked. Then I saw my phone on the nightstand and remembered. Lauren. The bank account. That message. I didn't check for new texts. I didn't need to. Over coffee, Caleb didn't press me for details. He just passed the creamer and said, You ever gonna tell me what happened? I took a breath. She drained the account while I was unconscious. His brow furrowed. All of it. $64,000. Emergency fund, maintenance savings, even my rollover. He set his mug down, hard. You gonna press charges? Already filed a fraud claim with the bank, I said. But since it was a joint account, they warned it'll be messy. You think she planned it? I nodded slowly. I don't think it was heat of the moment. Truth was, I'd started seeing the signs long before the hospital. I just didn't want to admit it. But what she didn't know was how careful I'd already started becoming. 3 months before the heart attack, I refinanced our home in Cedar Falls. Rates were low, and Lauren had said she was too busy to come to the signing. So I went alone, signed every page, put the house in my name only. My credit was stronger anyway, and she didn't ask any questions, not once. I also had a medical power of attorney drawn up last year after my buddy Rick had a stroke and his live-in girlfriend couldn't make decisions for him. It rattled me. So I asked Sadie, Caleb's daughter, smart as a whip, second-year law student, to help me draft everything properly. She was the only one I trusted with it. You thinking this far ahead? Caleb asked as I told him all this. Not about her, I said, just life. And then there were the accounts, the brokerage, the private IRA. Nothing flashy, just the kind of long-haul prep I thought we'd both rely on someday. I never kept them a secret. Lauren just never cared enough to look at the spreadsheets I sent every quarter. All those safeguards, done out of habit, not suspicion, had just become my lifeline. Later that afternoon, I drove to the First County Credit Union, the one I used for occasional contract gigs, not the joint bank Lauren had access to. I updated my passwords, reissued debit cards, and flagged my identity for any new credit pulls. Then I made another call. Blake Whitmore? I asked when the voice answered. This is Blake. My name is Ethan Cole. A mutual friend, Caleb Bennett, said I should talk to you. There was a pause, then a measured reply. You okay, Mr. Cole? Not really, but I need to know where I stand, with the house, the accounts, everything. Come by my office tomorrow, he said. Bring whatever you've got. As I hung up, I felt a calm I hadn't known in weeks. Not peace, but control. I wasn't running. I wasn't reacting. I was preparing. And Lauren had no idea the ground under her was about to shift. That night, after Caleb went to bed and the house had settled into silence, I went for a walk. Just me, the streetlights, and the sound of my boots hitting the cracked sidewalk. The air was crisp for early spring. I walked past tidy yards and quiet porches. All the things that used to seem so normal. But normal didn't feel like mine anymore. Somewhere between the second and third block, I realized something. I wasn't angry. Not anymore. I was done. Done chasing answers. Done wondering why. There was a strange calm in that moment, as if something inside me had finally stopped clinging to what had already slipped away. The next morning, I met Blake Whitmore at his office. It was a modest place in downtown Iowa Falls, tucked between a florist and a barber shop. Blake was younger than I expected, early 40s maybe, sharp suit, quiet presence. He didn't waste time. "Let's start with what you've got," he said, clearing a space at the end of a long wooden conference table. I handed over printed bank statements, the screenshot Lauren sent me, and copies of my hospital records from Des Moines Medical Center. He read through everything silently, eyes narrowing slightly at each page. "She took everything while you were flatlined?" he asked, not looking up. "Yeah. Nurse said I was out for nearly 2 days." He nodded. "We'll initiate a paper trail. Fraud, financial exploitation, possibly even breach of marital trust, depending on what else we find." "What do you need from me?" "Stay quiet. Don't respond to her. Don't go near the house unless I tell you. We want control here." I nodded. That part was easy. As I was getting ready to leave, Blake paused and asked, "You mentioned a niece, Sadie?" "Yeah, law student. Helped me with my medical power of attorney. Smart. Keep her close. She might be useful once we go into discovery." I thanked him and left. Outside, I didn't head straight back. Instead, I drove past our old neighborhood in Cedar Falls, slowed down near the house, but didn't stop. Lauren's car wasn't in the driveway, but another one was. A black Audi SUV. I'd never seen it before. I circled the block and headed back to Caleb's. That evening, as I was going through old emails, a new message came through. Not from Lauren, but from an unknown number. "This is Patricia Wells. I represent Lauren Cole. Any further surveillance of my client's home will be documented as harassment. All communication must go through legal channels." I stared at the message for a long time. Wells. I knew the name. She was aggressive. A high-end divorce attorney who specialized in taking everything her clients asked for. And then some. I put my phone down, leaned back in Caleb's guest room chair, and stared at the ceiling fan spinning overhead. They were watching me. I was watching them. And now, the gloves were off. 2 days after receiving that message from Patricia Wells, Blake called. His tone was sharper than usual. "She's trying to get ahead of us," he said. "Lauren filed a preliminary motion. Her lawyer is framing your absence after the hospital as abandonment." "Abandonment?" I repeated, stunned. "They're claiming you left the marital home without notice, haven't communicated, and are emotionally unstable post-hospitalization." I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "She emptied our accounts while I was unconscious." "She's playing offense," he said, "trying to paint you as unreliable before we bring up what she did." "So what now?" "Now we hit back," Blake replied. "I filed for an emergency injunction regarding the funds she withdrew. We'll get a judge assigned today. If we're lucky, someone with a backbone." That afternoon, I shaved, put on the only suit I owned, a dark gray one I kept in my truck for funerals, and met Blake at the Black Hawk County Courthouse. The courtroom was smaller than I'd imagined, intimate, too close for comfort. Lauren was already seated with Patricia Wells beside her. Both looked polished, coordinated, confident. But Lauren's eyes darted the moment she saw me, as if part of her didn't expect I'd actually show. I didn't look away. Judge Howard entered a few minutes later. Late 60s, white hair, thick glasses. He didn't waste time. "Ms. Wells," he began, "your client withdrew a substantial amount from joint accounts while Mr. Cole was under intensive medical care. Is this accurate?" Wells stood. "Your Honor, My client had full access to those accounts and acted under emotional distress, believing the marriage was deteriorating. Was she aware Mr. Cole was hospitalized? Yes, Your Honor. He set his pen down. So, while he was unconscious, she took everything? Wells straightened her posture. She believed Mr. Cole had kept financial secrets from her, specifically refinancing their home in his name only. Judge Howard tilted his head toward me. Mr. Cole, is this true? Yes, I replied clearly. 3 months before the heart attack. She said she was too busy to attend the signing. I did it to lock in a lower rate and to protect our equity. It wasn't a secret. It just wasn't a priority to her. The judge turned back to his notes. I'm ordering the funds in question frozen. Neither party is to access or move any money until a financial assessment is completed. I exhaled slowly. It wasn't a victory yet, but it was the first blow landed. As we stepped out of the courtroom, Lauren tried to approach me. Patricia reached for her arm, but not before Lauren said, just loud enough, Ethan, please. You don't understand. I walked past her. Outside, Blake pulled a folded document from his briefcase. We've got the house in your name. The emergency funds frozen. The judge didn't buy the abandonment claim. She's not going to back down, I said. No, Blake agreed. But that's okay, because now we don't have to play defense anymore. I didn't say anything. I just looked back at the courthouse doors. Lauren wasn't just fighting for money. She was fighting because she knew, for the first time, I wasn't hers to manipulate anymore. A week after the injunction hearing, I got a call from Sadie while I was drinking coffee on Caleb's porch. Her voice was calm, but I could tell she was sitting on something big. I think I found something, she said. Go on. There's a bank account. Not under your joint names, just Lauren's, but someone else is listed as an authorized user. I sat up straighter. Who? Nathan Hale. I closed my eyes. Nathan, our neighbor. The same guy I'd seen in the black Audi parked outside the house. The same man Lauren said was just a friend when I once asked her about a strange voicemail. Sadie continued. It was opened 18 months ago. Regular deposits, all just under $10,000. That's below the mandatory reporting threshold. She's been hiding money? Looks like it. Structuring it carefully, too. Whoever helped her knew what they were doing. I felt my stomach twist. Not from shock, but from the bitter taste of confirmation. I thanked her and hung up. 5 minutes later, I called Blake. She's been planning this, I told him, not reacting. Planning he met me that evening in his office. The moment I walked in, he slid a folder across the desk. Sadie already emailed me everything, he said. The deposits line up almost perfectly with your long-haul schedule. Every time you were gone for more than a few days, another deposit appeared. She was stockpiling my earnings, I muttered. More than that, Blake said, pulling out another document, a hotel invoice from Minneapolis 3 months prior. Guess who checked in under Nathan Hale's name, and guess where you were that week? Seattle. He nodded. It wasn't random. It was covered. Nathan was helping her build a financial exit plan. Only now, she's the one trapped. I ran a hand down my face. Do we know if he's still around? Still owns the house. But from what Sadie's tracking through financial systems, he started liquidating. Sold some securities, cleared 2 checking accounts. He's preparing to run. Blake nodded. And she might go with him. The betrayal didn't hit like a tidal wave. It was slower, meaner, like watching mold spread on something you once cared for. Lauren hadn't just made a mistake. She'd made a system out of deception. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat at Caleb's kitchen table long after he went to bed, organizing files, rechecking every receipt, every financial trail. I started compiling a timeline: dates of deposits, travel, missed calls, shifts in Lauren's behavior. Then I pulled up photos on my phone. Shots I'd taken of the backyard a few months back, new landscaping, a prefab shed I never approved, all added while I was out west on a 3-week haul. All improvements, all paid for with my money, and all on a house that legally belonged only to me. I sent them to Blake with one word: documented. His reply came quick: good. We're building leverage. And that's when I knew this wasn't just a divorce. It was a full-scale extraction from a woman who had calculated every move, except one. She never thought I'd fight back. 2 days after I sent Blake the photos of the shed and backyard upgrades, his phone lit up with an unexpected call from Patricia Wells, Lauren's attorney. They wanted to make a deal. Blake called me that evening with a tone that said more than his words. She's offering to return half of the withdrawn funds, he said, in exchange for 50% equity in the house. I didn't say anything. They're testing us, he continued, seeing if you'll take a quick settlement and walk away. And what do you think? I think they're nervous. They don't make offers like this unless they feel pressure. What do we tell them? Blake smiled faintly. Nothing. Let them stew. I spent the rest of that week doing exactly what Lauren never expected. Nothing public, no angry texts, no doorstep confrontations, just silence, which, in a battle like this, can be louder than shouting. Behind the scenes, though, I was working. I called HR at my trucking company and asked about the disability insurance I'd been paying into for over 20 years. After explaining my condition and the doctor's restrictions post-cardiac event, they confirmed I qualified for 60% of my base salary for up to 12 months. It wasn't just relief, it was armor. A new income stream Lauren didn't know about. One more card I didn't have to lay down yet. A few days later, Caleb and I drove past my old street again. This time, it wasn't my house that caught my eye. It was Nathan Hale's. A for-sale sign stood square in the front yard. He's running, Caleb muttered. I nodded. And she might be going with him. Back at the house, I called Sadie. An hour later, she confirmed what we suspected. Nathan had liquidated nearly $90,000 into cashier's checks, spread across multiple accounts. It was obvious now. They weren't just preparing, they were escaping. I called Blake immediately. They're moving fast. I'll file for an emergency injunction in the morning, he said. We'll freeze all assets and prevent any property transfers or out-of-state relocations. That night, I barely slept. I kept replaying everything Lauren had done in silence: the stolen money, the secret account, the lies she'd stacked like bricks between us. But instead of rage, I felt ready. The next morning, I woke to a message from Lauren. We need to talk, just you and me, no lawyers. I showed it to Caleb over breakfast. She's desperate, he said. I nodded. That's good. I forwarded the message to Blake. His reply came within minutes. Don't respond. Injunction hearing is at 2 p.m. At 1:30, I pulled into the courthouse parking lot and spotted Lauren and Nathan standing near his car. They were arguing, quietly, but urgently. She looked anxious. He kept glancing toward the building like he couldn't wait to get away. They didn't see me, but I saw everything. I reached for my phone. Pressed record, 30 seconds of video. No sound, but the body language said it all. The hand gestures, the frustration, the intimacy, the panic. Inside, Blake was already waiting outside the judge's chambers. I handed him my phone. Footage, I said. Fresh. He watched the clip once, nodded, and slipped it into his folder. Perfect timing, he said. Judge Howard's already in a mood today. I tightened my tie, breathed deeply. Then let's not keep him waiting. The courtroom was smaller than I remembered. Just 4 chairs, a narrow table, and the low hum of an aging HVAC system. Judge Howard sat at the head, glasses low on his nose, reviewing our files in silence. Blake sat beside me, calm but focused. Across from us, Patricia Wells whispered something to Lauren, who kept her eyes fixed on a paper in front of her. Nathan Hale wasn't present. He wasn't legally part of the divorce. But he might as well have been. His fingerprints were all over everything. Judge Howard cleared his throat. We are here to address an emergency injunction concerning the possible liquidation of marital assets and the undisclosed financial actions of both parties. Blake stood first, handed over the video on a flash drive. Your Honor, this was recorded yesterday, outside the courthouse. It clearly shows Mrs. Cole and Mr. Nathan Hale, who has been linked to multiple financial transactions with her, discussing matters we believe are relevant to the motion before you. The judge watched the clip silently. No sound, just Lauren and Nathan arguing, gesturing, avoiding eye contact with the building. Miss Wells, he said, removing his glasses. Would your client like to explain why she declared under oath that she has no personal or financial relationship with Mr. Hale, when this video suggests otherwise? Wells adjusted her blazer. Your Honor, the nature of Mrs. Cole's relationship with Mr. Hale is irrelevant to the division of property and assets. It is, he interrupted, when she is moving large sums of money with someone not legally tied to this case. Lauren shifted in her seat. She wasn't calm anymore. Furthermore, the judge continued, this court has evidence that funds were withdrawn while Mr. Cole was hospitalized and medically incapacitated. The timing, the intent, and the concealment, these are not small details. Blake leaned slightly forward. We're requesting a freeze on all accounts connected to both Mrs. Cole and Mr. Hale, a court order preventing the sale or transfer of any real estate, and temporary exclusive use of the marital residence granted to Mr. Cole. Wells opened her mouth, but Judge Howard raised a hand. I've seen enough. He pulled a paper from his folder and signed it. As of this moment, all known assets tied to Lauren Cole and Nathan Hale are frozen. Neither party may sell, transfer, or obscure funds until full financial discovery is complete. Additionally, given Mr. Cole's ongoing recovery and the existing medical documentation, I'm granting him temporary exclusive access to the marital home. Lauren let out a soft, choked breath. Her eyes darted toward me for the first time in weeks. Your Honor, Wells tried again. No, he said firmly. The exploitation of a medically vulnerable spouse is something this court takes seriously. Be grateful I'm not recommending criminal charges at this point. He adjourned the session without further comment. Outside, the sun was brutal and cold at the same time. Blake exhaled slowly. That was a turning point, he said. From here on out, we're not just reacting. We're building the final case. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just looked at the courthouse behind us. For the first time since this nightmare started, I didn't feel like a victim. I felt like a man reclaiming his ground, one ruling at a time. 3 months after my heart nearly gave out, I walked through the front door of my own house for the last time. It was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that echoed off the walls. No dishes in the sink, no wine glasses on the counter, no trace of Lauren. Just me and the distant hum of the refrigerator. The house didn't feel like home anymore. It felt like a stage after the curtain drops. Empty, with the props still in place. The divorce had finalized quicker than anyone expected. After the emergency hearing, Lauren had no fight left. Nathan Hale had vanished. No forwarding address, no sign of return. She was left to deal with the consequences alone. In the end, the court awarded me the house, my truck, and 80% of our shared savings. Lauren got her car and what was left, about 20%. The hidden account was split 50-50, but only after she used her half to pay my legal fees. Irony has a strange way of balancing the scales. We never spoke again. Everything went through attorneys. No texts, no calls, no closure. Just paperwork and silence. A few weeks later, I sold the house. I didn't need it. Too many ghosts in the walls. Too many memories anchored to each room. Most of them rewritten now, viewed through a different lens. I bought a smaller place just outside Iowa Falls, closer to Caleb and Sadie. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine. The kind of quiet that doesn't echo, just settles around you like a blanket. I used part of the money to help Sadie with law school. She's going to be an incredible attorney. Hell, she already is. She saw this coming before I did. She saw me when I couldn't. I don't drive long haul anymore. Doctor's orders. My heart's strong, but not invincible. These days I dispatch for the same company I used to run freight for. It's stable, predictable. I'm home every night. There's something to be said for knowing what's waiting on the other side of your front door. People ask if I'm bitter, if I'm angry. If I regret staying with Lauren as long as I did, I'm not. Not anymore. Anger is a weight, and I've carried enough of those for one lifetime. Lauren thought she took everything from me the day she emptied that account. But what she really did was give me a reason to reclaim my life, to stop drifting, to stop letting the miles on the road measure my worth. Last week, while organizing the garage, I found our wedding album in a box I hadn't touched since the move. I flipped through it for a few seconds. Smiles that meant something different now. Promises that had expired quietly. I didn't burn it, didn't throw it out. I just closed the cover, slid it back into the box, and placed it on the top shelf. It's part of my story, but it's not the end. The heart attack nearly killed me. The betrayal nearly broke me. But I'm still standing. And sometimes, the life you rebuild turns out stronger than the one you lost. 2 months after the dust settled, Sadie invited me to her law school symposium. She was giving a short talk on financial exploitation in domestic relationships. Said it was just a small classroom presentation. I showed up anyway. Tucked my shirt in, wore clean boots. The room was full of 20-somethings typing notes and sipping overpriced coffee. But when Sadie took the podium, everything quieted. She spoke clearly, confidently, about cases where trust was broken, about people who didn't even know they had rights until it was too late. And then she paused, glanced in my direction, and said, "This next story is personal." She didn't use names. She didn't need to. She spoke about a man who nearly died, and how the betrayal that followed changed his life, but didn't define it. She ended with a line that stuck with me. Survival is just the beginning. What we fight for afterward, that's the legacy. Afterward, as we stood in the hallway, she smiled up at me. "You okay?" she asked. I nodded. Proud. That's what I am. And if you're still here, listening, thank you. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share this story, because someone out there needs to know it's never too late to start over.